Boldwood presents In This Together, written by Laura Carter and read by Stephanie Cannon. For Rocky. Chapter 1. Hannah.
I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Right on cue, TJ's wide eyes filled with horror, and he started to scream bloody murder in the vicar's arms. Hannah thought she would cry too if someone threw cold water over her head when she was trying to nap. She smiled, pretending all eyes in the congregation weren't on her, as she accepted her baby beside the church font, whispering to him as she bounced him in her arms. The drenched, already thick and unruly mass of black hair on his head served as confirmation that he was now a blessed soul. She wasn't sure she believed in God and the Bible, but she believed in something, and she had many blessings to be thankful for. Luke, her eldest son, who was going through the hormones of a late teenage boy, but was a talented, smart kid. Jackson, her middle boy, who was straddling the age of innocence and prepubescence, 1 minute playing tag with friends, and the next sneaking glances at the magazines Luke kept under his bed that Hannah pretended not to know about. And she had Rod, whom she sometimes referred to as the biggest kid of them all, more affectionately known as her husband. When they got pregnant in college, it was as if Rod had frozen in time, forever throwing his clothes on the floor to be laundered by someone else, addicted to all sports, watching, playing, talking about them, but the same guy she'd fallen in love with and was still very much in love with. He was her very good-looking menace in the bedroom, lazy-ass best friend. For all their imperfections, including her own, Hannah's family was her world, and it was important to her to have them blessed, just in case. "Can I take him?" "Sure," Hannah said, handing off TJ to the waiting arms of Sophia. Hannah's family didn't stop at her kids and husband. It extended to the 3 most important ladies in her life: best friends Andrea and Rosalie, and Sophia, who was biologically Andrea's kid sister, but who felt like a sibling to Hannah, too. Sophia held the baby's soaked head of hair against her chest, and her eyes shone as she made faces to TJ. It had been a while since Hannah had seen the sparkle in those beautiful eyes. The cause of that spark going out was standing right next to her, Jay, Sophia's husband, whom everyone could see was a waster except Sophia. "It looks good on you," Hannah told her, receiving a soft smile in return, but one that didn't quite reach her cheeks. "I'm going to be the best godmommy you've ever had, baby boy," Sophia told him, miraculously turning his tears to giggles. "I don't think so. You'll be second best." The voice belonged to Rosalie, who appeared next to them, tickling TJ's stomach with her perfectly manicured fingers. Rosalie always looked the part, and today was no exception. Her long hair fell in salon-styled curls across her shoulders. Though she was willing to tickle TJ's tummy, she was standing a safe distance from him in her tailored cream coat, which probably cost more than Hannah earned in a month. Together, the 3 women and a baby led the christening party out of the church in New Jersey. "I don't understand why I'm not a godparent. I'm a godparent to Luke and Jackson," said Andrea, following behind them. Andrea was Hannah's oldest and most loyal friend. She and Sophia had moved with their dad from Nashville to New Jersey when Andrea was a young girl and Sophia a baby. They'd moved into a house on the same street as Hannah's parents, and Andrea had been in Hannah's class at school. Their friendship had been formed quickly when Hannah had shown Andrea the answers to their math homework because Andrea had forgotten to do it. The reality had been that Andrea hadn't just forgotten, she hadn't had time. She was a young girl with too much responsibility at home.
I thought you said you didn't want to be TJ's godmother,
Rod said, sidling up to Andrea. "That's not at all accurate," Andrea quipped, stone-faced. "I said if something happened to you and Hannah, wouldn't I have to take the kids anyway?" "Therefore, you don't need the title," Sophia said across her shoulder. "Whereas Rosalie and I haven't been godmothers before, and we need this." Secretly, Hannah hoped that asking Sophia to be a godmother to TJ would give the sisters something new to connect over, because recently there'd been tensions between them. They reached the churchyard where Rod called to their group to bunch together for photographs. Hannah, Rosalie, Andrea, and Sophia stood in front of the church, with the remaining friends and family gathered behind them. Luke and Jackson stood to Hannah's left, already looking disheveled in their school trousers, shirts now partly untucked with skewed ties. "Plus," Rosalie said, already smiling as Rod handed his camera to another churchgoer and offered instructions on focusing the lens. "I buy the best gifts." "That isn't true," Andrea said through her own tight smile, her eyes squinting against the sun's rays as Rod slipped into the row between her and Hannah. "What about the drum kit I bought Jackson for Christmas? He said that was the best gift anyone has ever bought him." Rod held out his hands from his side and turned to Andrea.
"And she wonders why we didn't make her godmother."
Just as Andrea retorted, pointing a finger at Rod, TJ started to cry. Luke pushed Jackson, and the stranger sent the camera flashing. Hannah laughed. A perfect picture of her family. Her oldest boys fighting, her baby crying, Rod bickering with Andrea, Rosalie posing as if she was on a red carpet at a movie premiere, oblivious to the world around her, Sophia trying to appease TJ. If this were Hollywood, the four women might be referred to as the ditzy rich one, Rosalie, the bitchy promiscuous one, Andrea, the 3 times mom, one accidental who married the college jock, Hannah, and the slightly quirky, quietly bitter younger sister, Sophia. On the face of it, Hannah, Andrea, and Rosalie might have seemed unlikely friends, and heck, they could drive one another up the wall at times, but they shared a bond as strong as any family. Hannah's small yard wasn't really big enough to host 20 adults and countless kids after the christening, but the other options had been expensive. She and Rod were far from flush at the best of times, but things were tighter than usual while she had been on maternity leave. When she'd go back to work next week, they would get abundantly worse thanks to childcare bills. That was the thing about 3 kids with large age gaps between them. Just when she thought they could start to get on track financially, another kid would come along. Her boys were the loves of her life, but they weren't cheap. So they had a questionably safe bouncy castle in the yard. Hannah had made party food, Rosalie had generously decorated the place with blue bunting and balloons, and Andrea had supplied a barload of alcohol. Happily, the sun was shining. Though it wasn't the warmest of spring days, sitting directly in the sunlight with a sweater, it was warm enough to have the party between the kitchen and outside. As people started to arrive from the church, kids making a dash straight to the bouncy castle, and adults making a dash directly to the drinks table, Hannah fussed around her kitchen, uncovering bowls of dips and chips and laying them out on the bunting-trimmed kitchen table. "What can I do to help?" Sophia asked, appearing at the kitchen door. "There are a few pizzas in the freezer in the garage, if you wouldn't mind grabbing them and popping them in the oven." "Sure thing," Sophia said, knowing her way around Hannah's house well enough to get on with the task. Hannah took a stack of 3 trays of sandwiches she prepared the night before from the fridge. "Can I help?" Hannah's mom lifted the top 2 trays from Hannah and set them down on the countertop. "Thanks." She had a strained relationship with her parents. They'd never approved of Hannah dropping out of college to have Luke. After his birth, everything they said had felt like "we told you so." Whilst Rod was away playing football and finishing college, Hannah had struggled to bring up Luke alone. Night after night and all day long, he screamed through colic. Then, one night, when Luke was only weeks old, she heard her parents having a blazing row. Her father, her own father, gave her mother an ultimatum. Either he left or Hannah left with Luke. Though they'd all agreed to move on from what had happened after Luke was born, things had never been the same between them. Hannah would always invite them to birthdays, christenings, and her annual Christmas gathering, and they would spend too much money on gifts for the kids as a way of making amends for the past. But she would never be able to get past the fact that the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally had kicked her out of their home with her newborn baby. One thing it had taught Hannah, though, was that unlike her own mom, she would always put her kids first. "You look pretty," Hannah said, nodding to her mom's peach dress and jacket combo. "Thank you, you too." She gestured to Hannah's blue-fitted dress, which she'd bought for a friend's wedding about 5 years ago and that she had only just managed to squeeze into. She still had a few pounds of post-baby weight to move before she would be back to her happy weight.
"She always looks pretty,"
Rod said, swooping into the kitchen and planting a kiss on Hannah's cheek as he snuck his arms around her waist, stole a sandwich, then left again. A little help might be appreciated, Rod, Hannah called after him.
I'm entertaining, babes,
He replied through a mouthful of ham and cheese sandwich as he headed back out to the yard.
Have we got any more ice?
Rolling her eyes, Hannah left her mom needlessly rearranging things she had already placed on the kitchen table and headed to the garage. The door was already open, and she could hear Sophia and Jay talking inside.
Soph, come on, it's a kids' party. There are a million better places to be. You used to be fun.
She leaned against the wall and listened, instantly rattled by Jay. Since he and Sophia had been together, he'd slowly changed her, from convincing her to change her signature edgy haircut to stopping her from seeing her friends. Jay was manipulative and sly, increasingly so, Hannah thought. Jay, I'm godmother. My dad is here. Plus, I told Hannah I'd help out.
Are you telling me you'd rather cook pizzas and listen to kids screaming than be with me, huh?
Then his tone changed, and Hannah could imagine him schmoozing up to Sophia the way he did. Whatever happened next, Sophia started to giggle. Stop it, not here. Let me help sort the food, then we'll leave. Hannah heard the freezer door shut.
Whatever, Soph, go cook your pizzas.
Hannah tiptoed a few feet away from the door, making a mental note to share the latest of Jay's shitty behavior with Andrea, then called out, Soph, would you be able to bring some ice too, please? Sure, will do, Sophia called back. In the kitchen, Hannah looked up from the quiche she was cutting and watched Jay sulkily traipse outside. Sophia planted a fake smile on her face and set the pizzas and ice down on the counter. Listen, Hannah, I'm really sorry, but Jay isn't feeling too good. We might have to take off earlier than I wanted to. She gave Hannah an apologetic look and added quickly, Not yet, though, not for a while. Really? It's so great to have you here, though. I know. Sophia looked glum. Like Hannah had told Andrea countless times, it was up to Sophia to finally see the truth about Jay in her own time. Hannah putting guilt on her from both sides wouldn't do anyone any good. She turned her lips into a smile. But there's nothing you can do if Jay isn't well. She busied herself with the quiche rather than seeing Sophia's sadness, because it broke her heart. The sooner Sophia saw through Jay's act, the better. Who knew? Maybe it was everyone else who had it wrong. Hannah would willingly be proven wrong if it meant Sophia was happy. When she stepped outside, Hannah saw Rosalie holding on to her latest boyfriend's shoulder as she leant down and fiddled with the heel of her stiletto shoes. Shoe trouble, Ross? She asked. Oh, no, Dior doesn't cause shoe trouble. Rosalie wafted a hand dismissively as she spoke without a trace of irony. I'm just clipping on these protectors. She held up a translucent plastic thingy in demonstration. You clip these onto the heels, and they stop you sinking into the lawn, you see? Genius, Hannah said, chuckling. Only Rosalie would come to someone's house prepared with anti-sinking heel protectors. Rosalie was aspirationally glamorous. In fact, Rosalie's glamour was essentially what had brought her into the lives of Hannah and Andrea. Back when Andrea had been running her family's indie music label, Hannah had been her assistant, and Rosalie had been making headlines as a socialite. She'd been dating one of Andrea's clients, a frontman of a rock band that had since won multiple awards and had numerous platinum albums. Rosalie, being somewhere between unemployed and self-employed, also known as living off a trust fund and charitably working if she felt like it, used to tag along to the band's recording sessions. She would always bring coffees or food, and she'd sit in the sound booth with Andrea, Hannah, and laterally Sophia as the band laid down their music. Beneath all the clothes and bags, Rosalie was a genuinely kind and funny woman. Her life was unreal. The money, the cliquey, gold-digging friends, the electronically revolving wardrobe, and the fact she seemed destined to forever search for but never find the Prince Charming to her princess. Knowing Rosalie was like having a free subscription to a television series the others just could not get enough of. Hannah strongly suspected that for their part, Hannah and Andrea brought a sense of realism to Rosalie's otherwise surreal world. Hours later, almost everyone had left Hannah's place. Luke had gone to a friend's house to stay over, having had enough of kids, his words. Jackson had crashed from a sugar high and gone to bed earlier than usual. TJ had taken a full bottle of milk and was currently sleeping. Hannah, Rod, Andrea, Rosalie, and her boyfriend George were sitting around a fire pit in the yard as the last of the wood burned. Christmas lights, which Rosalie had incorporated into the decorations for the day, cast a low glow around the lawn. "Let's go and do something, George," Rosalie said. "The night is young. We could go for cocktails when we get back to the city, or—"
Rosalie, some of us have to work tomorrow.
It was clear to Hannah that Rosalie wanted to take the huff with George, but then she must have thought better of it, for now at least. To Rosalie, Sunday night was no different to Friday, Saturday, or any other day of the week. When Rosalie and George left, Rod announced he was going to take a shower. He kissed Hannah on the head where she sat in a garden chair and asked Andrea,
Will you still be here when I'm done?
Andrea checked her watch. "I should be getting back to the city. I'll babysit Hannah whilst you're upstairs, then leave you guys to it."
All right.
Rod said, resting a hand on Andrea's shoulder and patting her once.
See you when I see you. Let's not make it too soon.
Andrea looked to the sky, but amusement teased the half-moons on the sides of her mouth. "Sweet dreams, pumpkin," she called after Rod, whose laugh they heard from inside the house. The nice thing about Andrea and Rod was that, as much as they bickered about Rod's constant tales of when he was very briefly a pro footballer, and Andrea always thinking she had better taste in music than everyone, Hannah knew they would do anything for each other. And the nicest thing was that they would do anything for each other because they both loved Hannah. For her sins, Hannah just didn't exist without Rod and Andrea in her life. Hannah leaned into her garden chair and reclined as far as it would go, closing her eyes. Andrea did the same so that they were both lying back, staring at the stars. "How are you feeling about coming back to work next week?" Andrea asked. Hannah was still Andrea's personal assistant, which sounded like it shouldn't work, but for the most part it did. Hannah had always worked with, or technically for, Andrea. When she'd been a new mom and Rod was on the cusp of turning pro but not yet earning any real money, Andrea had given Hannah a job at Sanfia Records. She had allowed Hannah to work flexible hours and bring Luke into the studio whenever she'd needed to. 17 years on, Hannah had never left Andrea. When Andrea moved on from Sanfia Records, it seemed a given that Hannah would go with her. Of course, neither of them had planned for Hannah having TJ and being off work for the last 4 months. "Mixed," she confessed. "I'm so ready for adult company, and I've missed the water cooler chat. But I don't know how I'm going to work out the logistics of traveling to Brooklyn every day and putting TJ in nursery. I was a lot younger the last 2 times around. Now the sleepless nights are extra painful." "You're only 38, Han." "Believe me, when it comes to screaming babies, there's a big difference between 21 and 38. They fell into companionable silence. "I'm glad you're coming back," Andrea said in a rare display of affection. Hannah had the sense there was more to come and remained silent, waiting. "I've missed you," Andrea continued, turning to look at Hannah. "You kind of keep my life together. Don't ever repeat this, but you stop me from making bad decisions." Hannah felt her eyes narrow and her brow furrow. "Have you been making bad decisions recently?" Andrea stared at her, and Hannah could almost see the thoughts whirring behind her eyes. But in true Andrea fashion, she turned back to looking at the heavens without saying another word. The brief moment of openness was gone. Andrea pushed her legs down, forcing her garden chair upright. "I should get going. I have a meeting tomorrow about the CEO position." She was on the cusp of a significant promotion. If she got it, it would be an incredible achievement. But she had a long list of successes in her career history as a music producer, and she deserved the position. Still, 38 years old was young to attain a role like CEO of a label at a music industry giant. And Andrea was female, which meant the promotion, if she got it, would be a huge deal. They both stood, Hannah making the first move to hug her friend. "You'll smash it." As the women separated, Andrea's cell phone started to ring. She rifled through her purse to find the phone and canceled the call. "It's late for a call on a Sunday night," Hannah said, her voice betraying her intrigue. "Are you seeing someone?" She was almost singing the question, desperate for some adult gossip. But Andrea wasn't in the mood to play, apparently. Scowling, she put the phone back in her purse and hoisted the bag onto her shoulder. "I'm a little busy to be seeing anyone right now." In Andrea's speak, that was a blatant yes. But there was no need for Hannah to call her out on it just yet. The fun could start when she got back to work next week. Andrea was subtly promiscuous. She quite often had a man on the go, but with the exception of Hannah, most people didn't know that. Hannah wondered who it was this time. The chances were she wouldn't know them anyway. The only person Andrea tended to go back to was rock god Tommy Dawson, and it had been a while since their last fling. Once Andrea left, Hannah brought the last of the glasses and plates inside and started to tidy the kitchen. As she began filling the sink with soapy water, two strong arms wrapped around her waist. Rod smelled of soap and manly deodorant. She breathed him in as he kissed her neck with his big lips.
This can wait. Let's go to bed,
He mumbled against her skin. What he really meant by that was, let's leave it for you to do on your own tomorrow. But it had been a long day, and the thought of curling up on Rod's chest was too tempting to resist. Hannah turned out the lights, leaving the messy kitchen in darkness, and let Rod lead her upstairs to bed. Chapter 2. Andrea. The sound of a champagne cork popping was music to Andrea's ears. She rarely drank champagne. Her drink of choice was whiskey on the rocks. And that sound was one she always associated with good things, like her younger sister Sophia's Independent Music Award for Best Producer last year, like Christmas when she was a child before her mom died, like Hannah's baby christening. But mostly, it was the sound of her own success. It was one beat and a score that had become the soundtrack to her life. Above all else these days, Andrea strived for success, to be the best at her job. She poured the pink bubbles into a flute and walked to the window of her new office. She closed her eyes as the first hit of effervescence danced in her mouth, and opened them to her upgraded view across Williamsburg, East River, and out to the big old city of New York. The lights of the city's skyscrapers shone out against the black backdrop of the sky. Not bad for a girl from Nashville, Tennessee, she thought. She scanned the view closer to her office, and her eyes landed 5 blocks away on the old building that had started it all for her. The lights were still on at Sanfia Records, the indie recording label that her father had started 25 years ago. 2 short years ago, she had been heading up the label when she was poached by XM Music Group to come over to one of their fastest-growing labels. She had never planned on leaving Sanfia Records, but circumstances, plus the fact that XM Music's group offer had been too good to turn down, had forced her hand. Now, being promoted to chief executive officer of the group's stellar label proved she had made the right decision. It had been a difficult transition at first, and she still had doubts sometimes. Every now and then she would feel a wave of guilt for having left her sister to take over the family business. But now that she was CEO of Stellar, she could help her sister by throwing work her way. She raised her glass, wondering whether her sister was still working inside Sanfia Records. In that move, she toasted her own success. She wished her sister and Sanfia Records the best of luck. She silently thanked her father for everything he had done for her for 38 years, because telling him to his face was not something she would do.
Knock, knock.
She hadn't heard him come in, but Hunter's familiar voice was welcome. She watched him close the office door behind him, taking in his latest slick-cut suit. Hunter always dressed to impress. He was a man in his late 50s who looked barely a day over 45. He was tall and deadly attractive. The creases that decorated his eyes served only to add charm to his face and fiercely blue eyes.
Mind if I come in to toast my newest executive?
He asked, holding up a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 glasses. Andrea felt her lips curve up slightly. Sure. After all, he had been the first person she wanted to tell when her promotion was approved by the leadership board. Hunter clocked the bottle of fizz Andrea was already enjoying and flashed her a devilishly handsome smile.
Great minds think alike.
He poured himself a glass, and as Andrea came to stand by him in front of her unnecessarily large desk, he clinked his drink against hers.
You deserve it,
he said. That means a lot coming from you, Hunter. He was, without doubt, an industry great. Like a lot of execs at the top of the music giants, Hunter's background was actually Wall Street, rather than the music industry. He was cutthroat and sharp, and helped XM Music Group, its artists, producers, sound engineers, and the business in general, achieve more accolades and awards than the world's other 2 largest recording labels. He had an eye for the market and trends, for lean financials and tight management. With Hunter at the helm, XM Music Group was capable of causing ripples that could result in whole-scale waves in the global music industry. He moved around the office, sensually running his fingertips along the black leather sofa at one side, the windowsill that rang the length of the full wall of windows, the table and chairs that took up one corner of the room. Power and control oozed from him.
Do you know what I like most about this office?
He asked, running the back of his hand along the vertical blinds that hung on the interior windows.
That you can do this.
He tugged on the line that drew the blinds closed. Then he turned the lock on the door, shielding them from any prying eyes that might still be in the office. Andrea's heart thumped in her chest, and her mouth was suddenly dry. No matter how many times they had been together, each time still felt exciting, outrageous, sinfully sexy. He was not hers. He belonged to another woman. She hated the truth, that knowing it was so wrong caused her body to hum with anticipation. Hunter. Her voice was so heavily drenched in lust that his name left her as a hoarse whisper. He crossed the room, his eyes on her. She licked her lips as her breathing quickened. Then he pressed against her, and all she knew was pleasure. The kind of pleasure that made her forget all the sensible questions she should have been asking herself. How did I let this happen? How did I fall for the one man I absolutely cannot have? She had lost count of how many times they had done this, how many nights they had shared countless orgasms over recent months. But she now knew the feel of him, the shape of him, the undertone of every noise he made. When she was once again presentable, her tailored suit in place and the rogue hairs from her chignon smoothed, she topped off her glass of champagne. Another? She asked Hunter.
Afraid not. I have a dinner tonight,
He said casually, as he unclicked the lock to the door and moved to open the blinds. Andrea checked her watch. It's already 8:30. Where's your dinner? He paused by the blinds, gave her a look of pity, and said,
Let's not become those people, Andrea.
which she took to mean he would be having dinner with his wife and possibly his daughter. She shook it off. You're right, she said, waving a hand vacantly. I have a few things to sort out here, so you best leave me to it. He smiled condescendingly.
That's my girl. You know my advice. New posts demand a stamp of authority. You should be working on your first big move.
Hunter flipped open the blinds, and standing right outside the office was Bryant Matthews, talking with another senior member of staff. Both men looked into the office, first at Hunter, then Andrea. Andrea jumped up from her position on her leather sofa, uneasy. But Hunter took it in his stride, dipping his head in acknowledgement to the men. If someone could have freeze-framed the look on their faces at that very moment, Andrea's would have said, I'm guilty. Bryant's would have said, I finally understand her promotion. He had been second in line for the role of CEO of Stellar, but he had believed himself to be ahead of Andrea, and now there was no doubt he would be harboring a grudge the size of Canada. Fuck, Andrea whispered.
We're two colleagues enjoying a celebratory drink, Andrea,
Hunter reasoned. With the blinds drawn? He picked up his suit jacket and drained what was left of his drink.
That, I admit, was unfortunate timing. I'm late, so I'll be seeing you. I'm proud of you, kiddo.
She watched the door close behind him, waiting for it. Sure enough, the guilt came. She wished she could put an end to it, but he had become an addiction to her. She was always waiting for her next fix. And they both knew that if he was a happily married man, he wouldn't come to her. What they were doing was wrong, dirty, but sensationally erotic. Just one more time. That was what she would promise herself after every romp. But her promotion to CEO had brought with it a stark realization. When she had first found out, she hadn't wanted to tell her best friend and executive assistant Hannah, nor had she wanted to run to her sister Sophia and tell her how she'd been promoted 2 short years after ditching the family label. She definitely hadn't wanted to tell Rosalie. No. The first thing she had wanted to do was celebrate her new role with Hunter. That thought terrified her. Chapter 3. Rosalie. I told him to go screw himself or her, but definitely not me. Rosalie bit out the words as she stomped her foot into a one-size-too-big Christian Louboutin shoe. She was a familiar face to the staff of the glamorous Upper East Side store. They were always willing to listen to her troubles in return for a swipe of her trusty Amex. They were Rosalie's CBT. "Good for you," one of the staff said, whose name Rosalie really ought to remember just one time. "Amen," said another, as she handed Rosalie a freshly topped-up glass of Laurent Perrier. The first woman, a petite blonde in a white shirt with silk neck scarf and a tight French braid, massaged Rosalie's ankle and smoothed the skin of her foot that was exposed in the pointed shoe. "How does it feel?" Rosalie smiled. "As painful as a divine shoe should feel." She assessed the way the crystal-encrusted heels looked with her royal blue silk wrap dress. "I'm not sure about it with this outfit, though." "Too much sparkle?" the second woman asked. Rosalie looked to her and told her, "A lady can never have too much sparkle, but let's try that pretty leopard print. Print is so in right now." As the women fussed around her, Rosalie sipped her champagne and picked up where she had left off, the breakup. "Do you know what he said to me? He said I'm not responsible enough for him. He said he wants someone less frivolous." Frivolous! Oh, and that he wants a woman who is capable of looking after him. Can you believe that? She lifted one foot out of the sparkling stiletto and slipped it into the leopard print sandal so that she had a different design on each foot. Pouting and adjusting her stance, she assessed the getup. "You know, I cooked for him on more than one occasion. One time, I actually chopped things and made a sauce from scratch. Does that count for nothing?" She turned her back on the mirror and looked across her shoulder at her reflection. "The heels of the leopard print are just so cute." "How long were you seeing each other?" the blonde woman asked. "Who? Oh, George and me? A while. 8 weeks, in fact." Rosalie sighed. "I just can't decide." She took another sip of champagne. "Hell, I'll just take them both. I deserve the endorphins, right, ladies?" Pooped, feet red and sore, dehydrated, Rosalie settled herself in her shopping bags onto the padded sofa of her favorite Italian restaurant. She was anti-carb 99% of the time, but when it came to her one-quarter Italian heritage, mommy's side, she made an exception. Good al dente pasta, perhaps brightened with a little shaved truffle, was worth missing 2 meals either side. And that was exactly what she felt like today. Maurizio, the owner of the restaurant, which was a gem tucked away down a side street off Central Park, hip-swayed his way flamboyantly to her table.
"Bella, you look as perfect as ever."
Rosalie tried to look bashful, but she knew she looked well. She had been on a juice diet since the breakup, and her Dior dress hugged her slender frame perfectly, not to mention the salon blow-dry she had prescribed herself this morning for medicinal purposes. She flicked her long brown waves across her shoulder as she thanked Maurizio.
"Your daddy's assistant called just a moment ago and said he would be a few minutes late. Perhaps some wine while you wait?"
Rosalie rolled her eyes. "Poor Daddy, he's so hard-working. The usual would be fabulous." Though family-run, the restaurant was not traditionally Italian in feel. It was bright and airy, with a wall of windows looking onto the street, white furniture and tabletops decorated with succulents and ceramic planters. The glasses and cutlery always gleamed under the overhead lights. The kitchen was exposed to the eyes of diners, meaning it was immaculately clean. Rosalie slipped her heels out of her shoes onto the table so that they hung loosely on her pinched toes, and she leaned back against the padded seat to enjoy her first sip of wine. How had she been dumped again? She was a catch, wasn't she? She was beautiful and slim. She had great taste in music, decor, and clothes. Food and beverages were something she was expert in. And she did run her own design business, kind of. Was it a business if she never asked for payment for her services? True, it had also been some months since she had designed the interior of her property, but she had to be careful with the projects she chose. Any interior designer was only worth the reputation of her last client, and they had to be big names. She had not got into the business to design just any old room for just any ordinary person. She designed perfect homes for her friends. and nothing gave her more pleasure than to see them and their families happy in beautiful surrounds. The effort she had put into Stella's mansion in the Hamptons had even earned the home a feature on Cribs. See, she wasn't irresponsible, she sort of worked. A lot of wealthy women didn't work at all. Most of her friends didn't. Other than a few years of modeling, Mommy hadn't worked a day in her life. But Rosalie had. It might not be traditional hours, but not everyone had the great eye for colors and placement that she had. And frivolous? How could she be guilty of throwing away money if it was her own money? She never asked any of the men she was dating for a dime. The trust fund she'd gained access to 15 years ago, when she was 21, had been invested and earned a small fortune. She didn't need to be supported. It would just be nice if someone wanted to support her, that was all. She didn't wait much longer before her father came through the door to the restaurant, dapper as ever in a sharp blue suit and crisp white shirt.
Sorry, kiddo,
he said, kissing Rosalie on both cheeks. She beamed. It's no problem, Daddy. Is work busy?
When is it not? It might have been nice for you to cross the river into Brooklyn just one time,
he said without malice. But this is our favorite and, well, Daddy, I've been dumped. Maurizio topped off Rosalie's glass and poured one for her father, who audibly appreciated his first mouthful.
By the man you brought to dinner the other night?
She nodded. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with me, Daddy?
There's nothing wrong with you, kiddo. You just know what you like and it intimidates men, that's all.
She smiled. You think so?
I know so. What are you ordering?
The usual.
See? A woman who knows what she likes,
he added with a wink. Rosalie chuckled. Her father always knew exactly the right thing to say. I got a new dress today for the memorial concert for Sir Presley John next week.
You did?
Yes, I think you'll like it. It's blue, your favorite.
Kiddo, anything is my favorite on you. Just make sure you coordinate with your mother this time. We don't need a fallout.
They ordered food and talked about the usual things. His work, her social calendar. They ate their food and drank their wine. Rosalie loved their lunch catch-ups. Her father had so many stories, and even the ones he repeated she never got tired of hearing. He was intelligent and funny, not at all the shark CEO the media portrayed him to be. He was gentle and kind, a real family man. He was the kind of man Rosalie wanted by her side, but just couldn't seem to get or keep. As their plates were cleared and after they had turned down the offer of the dessert menu, Rosalie asked, Daddy, do you think I'm irresponsible?
Irresponsible? Why would you ask that?
Well, George basically said that's why he was breaking up with me. And you know, some of my friends have busy jobs like Andrea or have kids like Hannah. Her father dabbed the side of his lips with his napkin, then set it down on the table, all the while seeming to think of his next words.
You have plenty of friends who don't have full-time jobs or kids, Rosalie.
She rolled her eyes. All they want to talk about is clothes and shoes and who's screwing who. Do you think I'm like them, Daddy? Do you think George is right?
Not at all.
She sighed. He is, isn't he? I mean, Hannah has just had a third baby and you just promoted Andrea to CEO of her own label. I mean, she's a woman, I'm a woman, we're practically the same age. Am I not as capable as someone like that? He paused for a moment and shuffled awkwardly in his seat.
Andrea has had a very different upbringing to yours, Rose. She works hard, but she's doing something she loves, and she hasn't ever known anything different.
It was true. Andrea had lost her mother when she was just a girl. Her dad had started the Sanfia Records label when he moved home to New Jersey after her mom, who had been a singer-songwriter, had died months after giving birth to Andrea's younger sister, Sophia. Her father was always at the record label he had founded, and by all accounts, Andrea and Sophia's education had been sitting in a production booth, eating takeout and hanging with budding rock stars. Rosalie had actually met Andrea, Hannah, and Sophia 6 years ago, when she was briefly dating one of their artists, who had gone on to make the big time with his band. They had split, but she got to keep the friendship, so, in all, she won. She had loved how refreshing Andrea and Hannah, who had worked at Sanfia Records as an administration assistant back then, were. Even Sophia and her quirkiness, though she was more the younger sister of the group with her own friends. They were just so down to earth and different from her usual girlfriends. But that doesn't exactly answer my question, Daddy. Her father rubbed his chin and said,
I think that not having an awful lot of responsibility doesn't make you irresponsible. How's that?
Rosalie scowled. You don't think I could do it, do you? You don't think I could run a business like Andrea? And for the first time, Rosalie felt bitter with envy. Her father shook his head.
I think you could do absolutely anything you set your mind to, Rosalie.
She watched him, her head speeding through 1,000 thoughts as she sipped her wine. Then she set the glass down on the table, folded her arms across her chest, and sat up straighter in her seat. Prove it, she challenged. Her father chuckled.
Waiter, can we get the check, please?
Daddy, I mean it. Give me a label at XM. He coughed into his napkin, and she knew he was attempting to disguise laughter, which made her endlessly more determined. I'm serious. I've been around the music industry for years. I love music.
Rosalie, you have no experience of running a business.
Not true. I run design projects.
You decorate your friends' homes very occasionally and when you feel like it.
She blew breath from her nostrils. I manage my investments. Her father dropped his napkin to the table in a move that reflected Rosalie's own exasperation. No one ever took her seriously. Well, no more.
You have no experience in music production, Rose. Designing interiors based on Elvis Presley's Jungle Room and dating rock stars really doesn't count.
She gasped. You came from Wall Street.
Rosalie, I can't just gift you a record label. You have to earn a position like that.
His tone softened.
Look at Andrea. She has been a producer as long as she's been an adult. She's won countless awards. That's experience.
But you think I could do it if I had experience, don't you, Daddy? She asked sweetly. He reached out and took her hand atop the table.
Sure I do, kiddo.
Rosalie snatched her hand back petulantly. Fine.
Fine?
Yes, fine. I'll get experience, then you can give me a label. She stood from the table and gathered her bags excitedly. I know exactly what to do. She bent and kissed her father's cheek. Thank you for always believing in me, Daddy. I won't let you down. And she turned on her heels and strutted out of the restaurant, leaving her father to pick up the check and his bottom jaw. Chapter 4. Hannah.
It's fucking 4 a.m,
Rod grumbled, rolling over and slamming his pillow down across his ears. I guess it's my turn again then, huh? Hannah tossed back the bedsheets and staggered to TJ's nursery, feeling her way rather than opening her eyes. He was 4 months old and had been sleeping in a cot in his own room for 2 very long weeks. They had originally moved him from their bedroom and into Jackson's room, but their 11-year-old had tried to silence the baby on their second night together by throwing Buzz Lightyear at him as he wailed. So Jackson was now in the big boy bedroom with their eldest, 17-year-old Luke, who basically wanted to kill him all the time. A little to do with personal space, and a lot to do with raging hormones, she figured. Opening her eyes as far as was strictly necessary, Hannah picked TJ from his crib and held him to her chest. Are you hungry, little fella? Shh, Mommy's here. There now, there now. The ear-piercing, satanic screaming relented to more of a painful, body-chugging sob as they made their way downstairs to the kitchen. Hannah warmed milk as she tried to convince TJ to be quiet for just a second before he made himself sick again. Minutes later, she sat down in a kitchen chair and turned TJ onto his back in the crook of her arm. He latched onto the bottle teat and gulped down milk. And there it was, the best sound in the world, silence. Her eyes opened wider as the sky outside became lighter. Her baby boy pinned her with his big teddy bear brown eyes that were a match with his dark skin like his daddy's. Her exhaustion was momentarily forgotten as she stroked his tight black curls and smiled at her boy. You're a pest, do you know that? But I wouldn't change you. TJ had been almost as unexpected as Luke. You might have thought she'd have learned her lesson when the star of the college football team knocked her up at 21. Or again 6 years later, after that same football star had recovered from his broken back enough to walk but never play again, and gone through a phase of needing to have a second child to reaffirm he was a man. But no, despite having no space for a third child, no money to buy enough space for a third child, and both parents working their butts off to make ends meet, Hannah had fallen pregnant for a third time. Not quite an accident, since she and Rod were being sporadically lackadaisical when it came to protection, but far from planned. TJ drained his bottle and gave her an almighty belch across her shoulder before she took him back to bed. It was now 4:45, and she would have to be up in a little over an hour to sort out the kids and commute into New York, where she had, barely 2 weeks ago, resumed work post-maternity leave as Andrea's executive assistant at XM Music Group. Rod had told her to find another job after her short maternity leave to lessen her commute, but the fact was she couldn't earn as much with her experience and skill set as she could in the city. Plus, she liked working in the city. It made her feel like there was more to her life than just being a mom. Lately, she had felt increasingly like she did need more. And truth be told, she wasn't sure she could ever leave Andrea to her own devices. Her friend liked to play tough, but Hannah might be the only person in the world who knew that sometimes being called a cold-hearted bitch by asshole men in the industry who were jealous of her success could actually pierce that harsh exterior Andrea showed to everyone else. With her slippers scraping the carpet as she dragged her feet along the hallway, Hannah let her eyes begin to close again and felt her way to the bathroom. Half asleep, she lowered herself to the toilet and her butt sank into the toilet. Water sloshed up her cheeks and thighs. Mother effer! How many times have I told you to leave the goddamn seat down, Rod? She wiped off her skin with a towel, which she threw into the wash basket as she attempted again to take a pee. She sank down, this time onto the toilet seat, and from nowhere, tears pricked her eyes. As water came out of her down below, it poured out of her up top, too. She covered her face in her hands and sobbed. I just want to sleep. Going back to work was already proving harder with child number 3 than it had been with either of the others. Coffee. Just one strong coffee, and she was sure she would feel human again. Hannah dumped her purse in a drawer underneath her desk outside Andrea's office, one of a pod of 4 connected desks where she sat with the other assistants. A number of XM Music Group's labels were housed in the Williamsburg high-rise across various floors of the building, but all of the executives had offices on the 12th floor, ergo, so did their assistants. Since Andrea's promotion to CEO of Stellar Label, she and Hannah had been relocated. Andrea now had a large, plush office, and Hannah had a shitty desk with no view to the outside world, except via the glass walls of Andrea's office. Still, it was the prestigious 12th floor, and no one was crying or sticking putty in her hair or chocolate fingerprints on her blouse, or leaving up the toilet seat when she had repeatedly asked them not to. Plus, the 12th floor came with a pay rise, and she could certainly use one of those. Hannah was shortly followed into the office by the 3 other assistants. Ladies, I'm going to make coffee. Anybody want one? She asked. She received 3 resounding yeses and was handed 3 mugs, which she popped on a tray to take to the kitchenette. Sanctuary was near. Oh, good, you're here. She turned to see Andrea coming out of her office toward her, and in a split second was able to read the look on her friend's face that said, I'm in a take no prisoners kind of mood. I need you to bring me the sales figures for every artist at the label. I also want to see a list of the best performing artists for XM in Europe who aren't currently being pushed in the US. Rock only, preferably country rock. Oh, and I need you to find me a dress for the Presley John commemoration concert at Madison Square Gardens on Thursday. Something sophisticated with an air of sexy but nothing revealing. I'm happy to try on up to 3 outfits. I don't have time for more. Can you bring me my schedule for the rest of the week, too? Hannah raised one brow. Morning, Hannah. How was your weekend? The family okay? Andrea smiled. Morning, Hannah, and please and thank you. Then she turned and walked right back into her office in her perfectly tailored and expensive-looking pantsuit. Hannah took a breath. Andrea had become very different to work for since they moved to XM Music Group 2 years ago. Increasingly so since Hannah had returned from maternity leave. It was as if she had more to prove than ever before. She smiled less, snapped more, and often forgot that she and Hannah were friends first and colleagues second. Hannah wasn't sure if she was simply noticing it more since returning to work, if her tiredness meant she was less willing to overlook it, or if the promotion to CEO had gone to Andrea's head. Regardless, it certainly felt like something was more off than usual. Hannah looked to the other assistants. "Anyone else want to get those coffees?" She handed off the tray of empty mugs and pulled her blonde hair, dark roots starting to show, into a messy knot on top of her head. There really had been no point spending time straightening her hair this morning. Humidity had made it frizzy, and there was little chance she was leaving the office today, in any event. An hour and 2 sips of coffee after taking instructions, Hannah walked into Andrea's office with a bundle of papers. She found her boss staring out of the swanky wall of windows she'd inherited with her promotion. "Hey, I have everything you asked for." Andrea let out a short shriek as she spun quickly to face Hannah, spilling coffee from the mug in her hands. "Jesus, Han, you scared the life right out of me." "Sorry, I'll just leave everything here." Andrea crossed the room to her desk to grab a tissue and rub the coffee from her blouse. "Thanks." Nothing like sincere and high praise, Hannah thought. From anyone else, she might have struggled to hold her tongue, but Andrea was her friend, and despite her quirks, their years of friendship meant a lot to Hannah. Andrea had been there for her in her darkest hours. Hannah had been in her penultimate year of college when she'd fallen pregnant with Luke. Everyone, her own parents included, told her to get rid of the baby. But she and Rod hadn't wanted to. They knew it would be hard, but they'd decided to marry anyway. She hadn't anticipated her own father kicking her out with a newborn baby because he just couldn't stand the crying. Hannah was alone, penniless and homeless, whilst Rod was still trying to make it at college. For the next 6 months, it was Andrea who took in Hannah and Luke. She had a 1-bedroom rental in Brooklyn where the 3 of them lived, plus Rod when he was home. So people could see Andrea however they wanted to, but Hannah would only ever see her as her very best friend, and she was certain nothing could ever change that. "Andy, are you okay? I know you hate heart-to-hearts, but you seem your worst combination of cranky and on edge since I came back from mat leave." Andrea stopped fussing her blouse and paused long enough for Hannah to know there was something up with her friend. But Andrea's mouth opened and closed without words. Taking a document from the top of the pile in front of her, she turned her back on Hannah. "It's just the new role. There's a lot to be done." Hannah waited, but Andrea offered no more explanation. "Okay, well, you know where I am if you want to talk or drown in tequila. God knows I wouldn't mind a few child-free drinks." She made to leave and had reached the office door before Andrea said, "Hey, do you want to come to the concert on Thursday?" Hannah's lips curved into a smile. "Honor the legend that was Sir Presley John? Hell yeah, I'm in." Andrea smiled. "My closet is yours if you want to borrow something." Hannah nodded. "That'd be great." Though Andrea was slimmer than Hannah, her shoulders were broader than Hannah's and Hannah was taller, which meant they averaged at around the same size 8. "While we're on the topic, any specific requests for your dress?" "I trust you and the women in Saks." Hannah always thought Saks had a certain smell about it. As she walked in the main entrance, she inhaled deeply and was struck by rich, clean scents, like sandalwood and lemongrass, which could be summed up neatly by the word money. Hannah sometimes enjoyed shopping for Andrea when she was busy. Other times, it reminded her of what she didn't have. Once upon a time, Rod had been destined to be a professional footballer. He was one of the top 3 players in college. There were times Hannah would fantasize about what life would have been like for them if he hadn't broken his back so early in his career. She would have walked into a place like Saks and picked out anything she wanted, paying a cursory glance to the price tag at best. Stopping briefly to indulge in squirts of new scents from the perfume counter girls, Hannah made her way to women's wear. Andrea had closets packed full of shoes and bags, so she needn't worry about picking a dress to match particular accessories. Hannah went right to the evening dress collections. Sir Presley John's Remembrance Come Charity concert would be a star-studded event. The music industry would be out in force, not to mention the A-list movie stars that would turn up to an event like this. who had no doubt either never met or had merely met in passing Presley John. Any event that was big enough to take on Madison Square Gardens was always one of air kisses, faux compliments, and people blowing smoke up each other's ass for no good reason. Still, Andrea would need to look incredible and suitably like the newly appointed CEO of the stellar label. Many faces in the music industry would now be blowing smoke up her ass, following years of it being the other way around. Hannah came to a stop in the middle of the Escada concession and began her search for the perfect dress. There had always been something about Andrea, even at school, that made Hannah believe she would be a successful woman. Of course, back then they both used to talk about being successful. But Andrea's mom had once been beautiful and an incredible singer-songwriter. Her father had set up his own recording label. And Andrea was strong, sometimes too fierce, especially when it came to protecting her younger sister, Sophia. Hannah and Andrea had spent hours hanging out in New Jersey, talking about all the things they wanted to